Okay. Hi BookTube, Aaron here. I hope you're doing okay. Today for Tag Tuesday, I'm going to do the non-fiction journey tag, and this was created by Hannah from Hannah's Books, or it was sort of developed by Hannah. So she's um, sort of, I suppose, the next in line of what seems to be a tradition where a tag is just sort of developed to suit each month's reading event or sort of premiere reading event. So the tag started life as the Shake Timber journey tag, or no, sorry, the Shakespeare journey tag back in Shakespeare or September as some people call it, by the hosts of that event. It then evolved into the Victorian literature journey tag last month in October, and now Hannah has developed it, and now it's the non-fiction journey tag. And it's been great to see people do this, and I have been very kindly tagged by Hannah as well. So we'll jump in, and the first prompt is, what was your first experience reading non-fiction? And I think it was definitely a lot of dipping in and out and just exploring things, like encyclopedias and atlases and things. I think when it came to my own interests and reading, a lot of it was history. Um, I used to have loads of sort of kids' history books, and not particularly deep history books, sort of coffee table history books and things like that. The only example I've got for that kind of thing, and this is a more adult one really, but it's the kind of thing I just loved dipping in and out of as a kid, is What the Romans Did for Us by Philip Wilkinson. And yeah, I just really love it. It's mainly about architecture and technology, and I think mainly seeing how um, sort of Roman life impacted Britain really. So there's lots of pictures all the way through of sort of various sites and things like that, and there's also sort of recreations of um, Roman technology and sort of certain techniques that they had. And so you've got him sort of raising beacons there, and sort of signal posts and things. So yeah, I love jumping into that kind of stuff. And so that was really my entry point for non-fiction. The second prompt is, has the reading of a work of non-fiction ever brought you to tears? And I don't believe a work of non-fiction ever has, as far as I can remember. Number three, are there any people who have played a significant role in your non-fiction journey? And again, I think this is a no, really. With other genres and certain sort of time periods, I can think of certain people who have given me a nudge and sort of pushed me into it or have encouraged me. Um, Whereas with non-fiction, I feel like I've been really left to my own devices, which is quite cool because it is one of those areas of reading where it very much depends on your own interests, I suppose, if that makes any sense. Um, so for me, it kind of makes sense that I've been left to my own devices when it comes to non-fiction. The next prompt is, do you enjoy documentaries? Do you have favourites? And is there a subject that you would like to see on film? Um, and I do quite like documentaries. I don't watch nearly as many as I'd like. When I was a teenager, I really liked documentaries about music, and particularly about bands generally. I don't particularly like it if a um, sort of one figure is given loads of attention and almost deified in a way. But I like it when it is, I think, particularly about a band and it's people sort of coming together and just making something together and sort of working stuff out. So I love the Pearl Jam 20 documentary that came out for Pearl Jam's 20th anniversary. There's a great documentary about Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers called Running Down a Dream, which again I really like, and it's as much about the music as it is about um, the various members' personalities and how they gel, and and all of that. And obviously there's the Get Back documentary, which I loved as well. But yeah, when it comes to sort of documentary series, there's one I'm really enjoying at the moment that I'm partway through. It's called Rise of the Nazis. I think there are three series, maybe I can't remember whether the newest series is series 3 or series 4. But yeah, it is what it says on the tin. It's about it's about the Nazis, and the first series is Hitler's rise to power, um, and then I think it jumps forward then to uh, well into the Second World War and Hitler's um, campaign in Russia, and it's sort of comparing him with Stalin and sort of seeing their similarities and differences. Um, and then I think then there's series 3, which is the downfall, and now this new series 4, is the kind of aftermath, and it's the Nuremberg trials and trying to capture escaped Nazis and things like that. So that's where I'm up to at the moment. So there are 4 series, and that's a BBC documentary, and it's really really fascinating. I'm really enjoying it. And as for one I quite like to see discussed on film, it's going to be connected to a book that you'll be hearing a lot about. But I think it'll be quite an interesting documentary, although I don't really know who bar me would want to watch it. And I'd quite like to watch someone retracing the journey of Patrick Leigh Fermor. He starts off in a time of gifts, so walking from the Hook of Holland to Constantinople. I think particularly, since the areas where he's walking have changed so much now, and so it would be quite cool to see that contrast between the world in the book and then the modern day world and sort of what's left now. So that would be really really fascinating. But again, I'm not too sure who except me would want to watch it. Number 5 is have you read a biography about a person with whom you would with whom with whom you identify? I don't think I really have, not in a major way. Although often when I read a documentary, when I read a biography, um, I can kind of see traits of myself in the in the subject. So like in this Pessoa um, biography by Richard Zenith, I could kind of see bits of myself in Pessoa, but they were way way worse in him, and it made me feel a little bit better about myself. And in a similar way, I could sort of see certain similar tendencies with Sylvia Plath when I was reading Red Comet, um, both positive and negative. And again, they were much clearer and much more obvious in Sylvia Plath than they are in myself, which is fine. um, Number 6 is read aloud a short passage from a work of non-fiction that you love. And again, we're going to a time of gifts. It's kind of taking over the tag and taking over my non-fiction headspace, really. And this is from the very end, so it's the last paragraph, but it doesn't really spoil anything, I don't think. And he's just reached. I'm trying to find the name of the place where he's just reached. He's just reached Esztergom, I want to say. I hope I'm saying that right. Which is just on the border with Hungary. I think between Czechoslovakia and Hungary. And in the next book, he's just going to go straight into the heartlands of Hungary. But right now, he's on the fringes and he's describing this town and the sort of surrounding nature and just the feeling in this place. And this is what he says. I too heard the change in the bells and the croaking and the solitary owl's notes, but it was getting too dim to descry a figure, let alone a struck match, at the windows of the at the windows of the archbishopric. A little earlier, sunset had kindled them as if the palace were on fire. Now the sulphur, the crocus, and the bright pink and the crimson had left the panes, and drained away from the tousled but unmoving cirrus they had reflected. But the river, paler still by contrast with the sombre merging of the woods, had lightened to a milky hue. A jade-green radiance had not yet abandoned the sky. The air itself, the branches, the flag leaves, the willow herb and the rushes were held for a space before unifying shadows should dissolve them in a vernal and marvellous lights like the bloom on a green gauge. Low on the flood, and almost immaterialized by this luminous moment, a heron sculled upstream, detectable mainly by sound and by the darker and slowly dissolving rings that the tips of its flight feathers left on the water. A collusion of shadows had begun, and soon only the lighter colour of the river would survive. Downstream, in the dark, meanwhile, there was no hint of the full moon that would transform the scene later on. No one else was left on the bridge, and the few on the quay were all hastening the same way. Prized loosed from the balustrade at last by a more compelling note from the belfries, I hastened to follow. I didn't want to be late. So that's how that book ends, and I've sort of botched it a bit, but I just love his just lyrical and just really vivid writing. It's just lovely. So there are so many passages like that in The Time of Gifts, but particularly that ending of him just standing there on the bridge on his way into this town I just really love it. Where are we up to? Number 7. Do any works of non-fiction intimidate you? Which ones and why? There are many works of non-fiction that intimidate me. In fact, most tend to when I'm about to start reading them or when I'm first reading them in the first few pages. Or maybe intimidate is the wrong word, but I certainly recognise that quite often with like a big work of history or something, there's going to be a change of gears and I have to approach it differently than I would to any other book. And that's kind of the case with more or less any book. But I think particularly when you've just been reading lots of fiction and then you're going to read some non-fiction, it's a more noticeable difference, a more noticeable change of gear. But particular ones, so whenever it's a particular field that I know particularly when I know more or less nothing about it, that's always intimidating. So I'm still pretty intimidated by this. This is the essential writings of the American transcendentalists, which I know almost nothing about. There are a few writers here that I'm kind of familiar with, and I've just dipped my toe in the waters, but I'm still a little intimidated by this. Earlier I watched Brian from Bookish do this tag, and he was talking about um, the ancient historians, so from classical times, like Thucydides and Herodotus and people like that. And again, I tend to be quite intimidated by them and by figures like Cicero and Seneca, where I'm quite intrigued to read their stuff, but um, I am still kind of intimidated by them as well. Number 8. What tips would you give to somebody who is hesitant to read non-fiction? And again, this is quite similar to some advice that I've heard other people giving. But if you're anything like me, when I go into a bookshop, particularly when it's a bookshop that's like a retail bookshop selling new books, I tend to jump straight to the fiction, and that's where I look first. And if I'm going there to build up a little pile, that's where I'm going to build up my little pile. And I'll also make a beeline for the poetry section. Whereas any non-fiction that I tend to get, it's nearly always an afterthought. But particularly this year, I've been trying to make a little bit of a change. And actually, when I go into a bookshop, I'll go straight to the history, or straight to the philosophy, or something like that, that's a bit different, and just see what stands out a little more. And I have been finding it's a bit more exciting uh, when I take that approach. And actually, I think my non-fiction collection it's quite small compared to other genres that I've got, but it has been growing significantly this year. And so it seems to be that technique is working, and I'm certainly reading non-fiction more regularly, although it tends to be fairly big works of non-fiction, so it takes me quite a while to get through them. So I would say that just go straight to the non-fiction section, or there's not really a non-fiction section in a bookshop, so to the history section, or the travel section, or the biography section, or the nature section, or philosophy, religion, whatever, and just see what takes your fancy, see what jumps out at you, or sort of aligns with stuff that you're sort of interested. Maybe you've heard people talk about a bit, and it's piqued your curiosity, and just follow that and go with your gut and see how it goes. It seems to have kind of worked for me. And then number 9 is what are your favourite works of non-fiction? And it's interesting because if I was to think of what's my sort of favourite sort of subsection of non-fiction, I would tend to say it would be sort of literary biographies, about the lives of authors. Whereas really, I just went with my gut with this and just pulled off just the books that I felt were really my really my favourites, and the books that have sort of made more of an impact on me in the last few years. And a lot of them are sort of travel books, and I suppose sort of nature and history, and particularly books that sort of mix those things together. A book that does that really, really well is The Frayed Atlantic Edge by David Gange. He takes he decides to kayak from, I believe, from Shetland, all the way down to the bottom of Cornwall. There's a map at the beginning. I'm just going to see if I can find it. Yeah, there we go. So he starts off up there at the very top of the Shetland Islands, and he does it in a number of legs. He doesn't do it all in one go. And it's all about the Atlantic edge of Great Britain and of Ireland. So it's going around Shetland, and then he goes around Orkney, and he goes around the Western Isles here, and down the coast of mainland Scotland. Then he does the west coast of Ireland, and he goes down the coast of Wales, and then along the western edge of Cornwall. And as he's doing that, there's he's paying close attention to the nature of these areas, to the people and the customs, that many of these areas are dying out, but particularly the further north, like over on the west coast of Ireland, and up on the west coast of Scotland, and off the Shetland Isles and on Orkney, they seem to be more alive. And as he goes down the west coast of Wales, and particularly the west coast of Cornwall, it suddenly seems a little less alive. These older customs, they're not quite as alive in that area. That's the conclusion he kind of comes to, and he's sort of saddened by that. Whether that's completely true, I don't know. But as well, he talks and meets, he meets and talks to scientists and poets, and sort of all sorts of people, and it's very much just about how these landscapes impact us, and how we're living with them, and how they change over time. So I really, really loved this book when I read it. Probably due a reread because I really liked it. A book that kind of takes a similar approach in a way, that it's got bits of travel writing and nature writing and stuff like that, all amalgamated, is Underland by Robert Macfarlane, which I again really loved. I'd quite like to reread this at some point as well. But yeah, I really loved this. And when we think about the west coast of Scotland and of Ireland, I also really love The People of the Sea by David Thompson, which is all about the Selkie myth or legend, all these stories about the seal folk. Um, and it's just a magical book because it's not just about the stories. He's not just retelling these folk stories, but he's writing about going to the places where these stories are told and meeting the people and telling you about the people and their lives, and how then in the stories, in these legends, the people in the stories are very much a reflection of the people telling the stories. And David Thompson seems to have developed a very deep relationship with some of these people, and he goes back and visits them years later, sort of later on in the book. And like the Frayed Atlantic Edge, you're getting an idea of how these landscapes have changed, and how people have to move away, how times are changing, and this was written, I think, in the 60s. So a lot of people were moving to back to the mainland, or not back to the mainland, but after generations and generations on these islands there, for work, for money, they have to just sort of move away. So that's a really um, lovely book. And I love books about books as well. I really quite like How to Read and Why by Harold Bloom. Um, I've read a few things by Harold Bloom, and I think he is sometimes unnecessarily contentious. And I think he often writes very good books, but the title is almost never what the book is actually about. So although the title of this book and the preface to this book um, get you thinking that this is a book just all about why you should read, it seems to be, and how you can read. Really, it's a book about rereading and about the books that he keeps coming back to and why he loves them so much. And when you actually think that this is really what the book is about, the title is incredibly misleading. It's a wonderful book, and it gets you thinking about the books. I mean, he does make you want to read the books that are in here, but it also makes you consider the books that you would want to reread, and the books that have made an impact on your life as well. I really quite like this book, How to Read and Why. I really love Ariel's Gift by Erica Wagner, which is about Ted Hughes, Sylvia Plath, and birthday letters. So it's about their relationship, since it's really a kind of a study of a book by Ted Hughes all about their relationship, and it's trying to fill in the gaps and sort of get other perspectives on the story a bit. But as well, it just brings those poems to life as well. So it's a great companion to those poems, and I do find the relationship between Ted Hughes and Sylvia Plath really fascinating, and really tragic as well. And then the last one, this is one that I read this year, and I think it's one I'm going to keep coming back to, and it's one that I think will be a long time favourite book of mine, which is A History of Reading by Alberto Manuel, which is really is what it is on the tin. It's all about how reading has changed over the years, and all these all the different ways we read, and what it looks like to be a reader, and what other people might think if you're holding a book, or any particular book at any given time, and things like that. So I really love this book, and I just fell into it when I was reading it. It's full of great illustrations. There's Walt Whitman as a very wizened old man, and I really love this book as well. And would love to just buy and read loads and loads of books about books. And I think we'll leave it there. There are some of my favourite non-fiction books. I think the earliest read was Ariel's Gift, and that would have been about 8 or 9 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. So it's not going back super, super far, really. Most of them were read in the last 4 years, maybe 5 years. So there we go. It does say to tag people, and I think for the third week in a row, I'm going to duck out, and I will just say that if you would like to do this, then please consider yourself tagged and give it a go. But for now, I'm going to go myself. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.